Well,
Hello,
good.
and
Go on, Donna.
hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Donna Gordon, and I'm part of the membership team here at IIRSM. Your speaker today is Simon Jones. Before I hand over to Lee, who is your branch chair, I'm just going to run through a few things first. So to begin with, you should see to the right of your screen a toolbar with various options. You will be on mute for the duration of the webinar, but feel free to ask any questions, make any comments using the question area, and we will take some time at the end to respond to these. If you need any support using GoToWebinar, the I symbol will take you to the support site. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be pasted on the IIRSM YouTube channel after the event. So that's enough from me. Lee, I'm now going to hand over to you.
Okay, super. Thank you very much for that, Donna. So as Donna said, my name's Lee Marsh. I'm the branch chairman for the Northwest region. So a big welcome to all of our attendees this evening, and a very big welcome and thank you to Simon Jones, who's going to present some information to us very shortly. Just a couple of little bits of housekeeping really as a branch. First of all, we are still looking for some volunteers, in particular around the social media, things like LinkedIn. So if you like posting stuff on LinkedIn, if you like, kind of putting various comments on and things like that, then do please get in contact with myself or Donna at the IIRSM, and let's kind of have a bit of a chat about what it is in relation to social media that we really need. But we really need to be good, better at that communication. We really need a dedicated or a couple of dedicated people to do that. So if you are interested and you do like LinkedIn, then let us know, because we do need some support. Future presenters, obviously Simon this evening has joined us, so I'm really grateful for that. But if any of you have some particular topics or tools or tips that you're using, and you think actually this would be a really good example to help other safety professionals, then do get in contact with us again, and we can feed that in, just like Simon this evening, into our program. Because it's all about sharing, the IIRSM membership, CPD, it's about sharing best practices, and that's what we're about. So if you have got stuff like that, then please let us know. And we're also looking for venues as we get back to face-to-face for 2022. So if people do have some venues that we can come and use, and perhaps even have a little bit of a tour of a particular site, then that would be very, very useful to us as well. I just want to encourage you really to ask questions this evening. So if you have got any questions, or you have got some kind of comments to make, then do use the suggestion box, and Donna is going to ask those questions at the end for Simon, to be able to engage with as well. So I really do encourage you to as we go along, don't wait until the end, just type them in, and Donna will keep track of them and ask all of your questions and observations at the end. So thank you very much, and I will now hand over to Simon Jones for our presentation. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you very much. This is where it all goes wrong. Right, hang on. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet, Simon.
Okay. How's that looking?
Perfect. You're perfect. Thank you.
We're in business. Right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for logging in tonight. My name is Simon. I am the Director of People and Safety at a company called Link Contracting. We're a nationwide maintenance and construction contractor. Tonight I am going to be talking a little bit about taking a crisis management approach, and I'm going to set that against the pandemic, and really what happened to us as a business, and how we used some of the crisis management techniques that I picked up from my background to sort of get us through it. So without further ado, I shall press my button. Don't be distracted, by the way, by the background. I don't live with my mum and dad. I'm in the kids' playroom. I've had one of these done before, and I was in my little fella's room, and someone paused it and asked that question. There was a big picture of Marvel superheroes in the background. This is the best room for Wi-Fi in the house. So there we go. Right, next. Okay, who am I then? As I said, I'm one of the directors in the business. I achieved fellowship with the IIRSM quite recently. Had some great support from a couple of members there, and I became a fellow. And from that, I've wanted to give you know, a lot back, which is why I'm here tonight. I was already a chartered member of IOSH and do quite a lot with them as well, in terms of sort of mentoring people through the charter process and helping people with their qualifications and stuff like that. Experience wise, I've worked in the construction sector where I work at the moment. I've done some work in the rail industry, and I've also worked in education. A large part of my professional career, I was actually in the police as a police officer for 13 years with Merseyside Police. My career ended at the grand old age of 35 through injury on duty. I got injured one night on duty quite badly, and was poorly for quite a long time, for almost 2 years. And during that time, I was offered early retirement, and I say offered it. It was almost enforced upon me at the time, and I took it. I'd spent a lot of time in specialist units, in what in Merseyside's called matrix units. So they're organised crime units and anti-terror gun crime units. And I was in the CID as well, so I've done all the detectives qualifications and spent some time in the CID. And it was there really that I picked up a lot to do with crisis and incident management. We got trained a lot on some of the techniques that I'm going to talk to you about, which you can cross over and use in the private sector. So that's me. A little bit about the company then. I've been told I've got to do this by the gaffer. We are UK-wide, Link Contracting. We're a construction and maintenance contractor. We employ at the moment around about 170 people. We've got 150 vans on the road, so that's engineers out and about on the road, servicing clients like the Co-op, Tesco's, Well Pharmacy. We do a lot of work with local authorities, so Wigan Council, Holton Council, Greater Manchester Councils, on schools, a lot of work in live environments. And we've really been on a journey for the past 4 years to improve not just safety, but also our sort of people culture as well. And you see the rosettes there above, 19, 20, 21. We got gold awards with ROSPA all the way through. They were the first ones for the business. And this year we got the Fleet Safety Gold as well. So it's been a real sort of cultural journey for Link, which we've been on. So COVID-19 and the initial impacts for us, like everybody else, I don't doubt, on the 24th of March 2020, with the announcements that there was going to be the first lockdown, we closed all of our project sites, so all our construction sites. That's to the value of the company of about £9 million that was just shut down overnight. So on the night of the announcement, I phoned one of the owners and said, we're going to have to shut the sites. And there was no reluctance to it. We just shut the sites. So the next 3 days really were quite a sort of strange time, because no one really knew what to do. No one had heard of things like furlough and this kind of stuff. These were all sorts. This was a crazy time. This was sort of crisis time. So what we'd done already before March, we'd had an eye on the news, and it really was the news. It wasn't government guidance or anything like that. It was literally BBC News following what was happening in Wuhan. And we'd identified some vulnerable people, so some people who were older, should we say, and a couple of people who we already knew from doing some sort of some work with HR that were perhaps vulnerable through existing medical conditions. So they'd actually been sent home already. So we've been reasonably proactive already, but no one really knew what COVID was or anything like that. I can't say that we were ahead of the game at that stage, because we weren't. What we did then on after the 24th of March, the next day, literally during that day, and it was a very long day, we furloughed 50% of the company and sent them home. A very strange thing to do. I'm sure people who are on the call now had that experience as well. It was very odd, because all of my team were sent home, and at that point you're not sure whether you're actually going to go and you'll see them again, or what's going to happen with the company, or what's going to happen with people's jobs. It's a very, very, very odd time that was. We stopped all of our non-essential works, so as well as shutting all the sites, we pretty much stopped everything really, certainly for that first day. There was a lot of pressure from clients in particular as to what our response would be. There was the phone was ringing off the hook as to what, how we were going to look at this, and we needed to ask ourselves where and how we're going to go on from here. And it was at this point that the crisis management sort of techniques kicked in, and I'm going to talk to you about what they are and how they work in a minute. The effect then on us, and I wrote this presentation probably at the start of this year, so we've moved on a little bit, but we reopened our first site on the 20th of April last year, so pretty quick after they were shut. And literally within, and that was in Sheffield, it was a school we were building. I'm going to say within a day, possibly 2 days, the HSE were at that site checking our COVID measures, and we got a clean bill of health from them, and they were thorough, and they went through the entire site looking at what we'd done. And we used that experience to give us confidence, and then we had a template then of how we would open our sites. And what we did, literally week by week, was open up site by site using our template. So we created things like we were very digital as a company, so all of our inspections and all of our sort of site monitoring is all digital. So we had templates that I made that would check our measures and what was in place. People would work together. It was a team effort. We just used the Sheffield site as a template first to build on that. We were able to declare ourselves COVID secure. I know it's a tenuous sort of phrase, that, but those certificates that were sort of issued by the government that businesses were obliged to display, we were quite confident in what we were doing, even more so with the first HSE visit. We opened another site a couple of months later on a co-op site. That again drew attention from the regulator, and again we were given a clean bill of health. And it's when you're in the middle of that kind of pressure, those kind of things are good, because they give you confidence in what you're doing, not just as an individual but as a group of people as well, that you're going in the right direction. We managed positive cases that we had, and we did have some. We didn't see huge swarms of staff and collections of staff going down with positive cases. We had literally none on sites. Our issues were more people who were lads in vans really going out, perhaps in the stores. If you look, a lot of the plastic screens and the sort of social distancing measures, certainly in the co-ops, mainly around England and in Wales, were done by our company. So that was, we've done that. If you've been in any co-ops, what their sort of measures were installed by us. So we were doing that very quickly. Even in the first week, we were putting that kind of stuff in for them. But we had good relations of reporting when we'd have a case, and we managed it that way. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the measures and some of the things that we did for COVID in a minute. We did, it wasn't all good news. We did shrink a little bit, and in any crisis you've got to take the rough with the smooth. We did have 12 redundancies, so the company has shrunk a little bit. But we are now entering a new period of growth. We remained operational pretty much then throughout, and we've been back operational fully since, you know, I think we brought the last person back, aside from vulnerable people, in the third quarter of last year. Most of the people were back in work, or either working from home, or, you know, certainly operational. And the company has been profitable again this year in and amongst, you know, this background. So, crisis management approach then, what it's all about. 5 things there to think about and take away. These are broad things to think about whenever you're sort of dealing with a crisis, or it could be a major incident. You know, it's quite translatable. But if you think about these sort of 5 things I'm going to talk to you about, these can certainly help you manage it. Organisation, communication, change management, decision making, and resilience. There are 5 sort of key things that we're going to look at in some detail, and I'm going to give you some examples of what we did with each one. So in terms of organisation, it's getting yourself organised in the first place. So what we did in the early sort of first 48 hours was we bought ourselves some thinking time. That's really important to do, because there's noise everywhere. There's information coming in thick and fast. There's information potentially going out thick and fast, and you've got to watch that, what comes in and what goes out. So rather than react straight away, it feels a bit weird and it can feel a bit sort of strange, but what we did was we bought ourselves 48 hours thinking time, and we didn't really do a great deal other than in the first day decide to furlough people. Again, that was part of the thinking time. We didn't make any massive decisions, and that's really important. So buy yourself a bit of thinking time. You're going to get pressure, and we got pressure from clients as to what our approach would be, how, you know, what were we going to do? Were we going to shut all together? And we just didn't respond to it, other than to go back and sort of politely say, we're just considering our approach at the moment. So it doesn't have to be 48 hours. It was 48 hours in this occasion, but do think about, you know, some thinking time, some sort of soap time. Some of this information is coming in thick and fast, so just don't react too quick. Whilst that's happening, it's a really good idea, and we did it. We created a log, and I managed that log like and it's an incident log. So it's time, date, place, and it's every bit of information to do with COVID went on that log. I only shut that log 2 weeks ago. It's 250 pages long, something like that. It's massive. It's probably bigger than that. Every decision that got made during COVID has gone on that log. Time and dated, every bit of information, every communication that went out is all on that log. And that's really important, because I don't know, and no one knows, where this is going to go and what the impact of this will be a year from now, 2 years from now. So I don't know whether someone might decide to sue the company for something, perhaps, or ask a question of why we did something or didn't do something during this period. So it's very hard to think about and remember things after they've gone, because the memory fades. So everything is on that log. So all the decision making's on it, all the information's on it. You're going to get lots of questions, and you're going to get lots of information, as I said, coming in and going out. So you need to have a central approach. So what we did was we just stopped multiple voices. So if it was anything to do with COVID, it came from me in the end. I became our business lead, we called it. So if there was questions from clients, COVID related, it was all filtered through. And that's quite daunting, and it's quite hard, but it gives you control. You've got to get control of information, what comes in and what goes out, because without that, it's just chaos, and you've got to stop that. So you need a central approach, and it's in bigger organisations it can be quite difficult, but you've just got to have that sort of one voice. And it sounds it's always contradictory to a lot of sort of leadership and management ideas, where you're thinking about transformational leadership perhaps and having multiple people involved in decision making. In a crisis, and certainly in the early days, that doesn't work, and you need to be the asking goes out the window, and the telling comes in for a period, and it was like that with us for quite a long time, where there just had to be decisions made, and there was no debate, and there was no, let's think about this for a few hours. It was just one central voice and one central idea. Examples of where this sort of worked: we were very quick to understand what the definition of essential worker was for us, so it enabled us to operate literally really quickly. Changes and ideas about face coverings, we were able to move very quickly on what we would or we wouldn't do, and keep operating, and that worked for us, rather than be confused and people have different ideas about what's right and what's wrong. With this, that's the way to do it. There's just got to be someone has to take control of this and operate like that. And I know it's contradictory to a lot of the things we talk about in safety when we're trying to engage people and get people on board. In the early days, when it really is, the crisis is really on you, you can't operate like that. You've got to be the opposite of that. The idea is to feel ahead. You should feel ahead and not be overcome. And if you feel overcome, you've got to go back to these early bits of, have I got control? Have I got a central approach? And we very quickly felt ahead of the game. And that comes with a lot of research, a lot of reading. My time was completely taken up with this, but we always felt as we moved through it, we were ahead of the game all the time. And that's how to organise yourself. Your comms and your communications, having a central approach is really, really important. You've got to have one clear and a consistent message, and messages can get diluted, they can get convoluted when they're passed through chains of people. People can just completely misinterpret your message, so you've really got to get to grips with having a central approach. And your messages have got to be concise, but they've got to come often. So the timing of it was good for us, because in the January of last year we just introduced a digital HR system called IIRSM, and we wanted that because we wanted to go paperless with HR, and it was good because we thought, well, we could tag a lot of safety stuff onto it as well, which we have done. So we had the ability to reach all of our people digitally, and we used IIRSM throughout, and we use it now. It's just embedded to deliver these messages, so these key messages about what's going on, because you don't want, you've just sent 50%, or we had 50% of the company home, so 75, 80 people home. That is really bad for people's well-being. People really will feel disconnected very, very quickly, and the longer it goes on and there's no message, that is really hard to start to undo. So you've got to get their messages out consistent. You've got to get people feeling connected. And the senior team, one of their jobs each day was just to check in with everybody that they had in their team. So we had like keep in touch days, literally some of them on a daily basis, to make sure people were connected, people were reading the comms, and that was a key action that came out really quickly. I've talked already about controlling what comes in and what goes out. It is about taking control at this point of what what messages you're sending in, and what information is coming into you, because it comes in everywhere. So your log helps you. I was reviewing our log all the time. Information was everywhere from clients, from bits from the government, bits from you might pick up from the news. But it's really important with your communications to record the decisions that you've made and why you've made them. So on that log, we've got it's all the business comms. It's also all the health and safety messages. It's about making people feel connected. That's why it's so detailed. That's why it's so long. So every day it started again. So we set up really quickly a little system where with our key clients, we would just send them a paragraph of a report saying how many people we had in, any sort of major COVID issues that we'd had, and you're sending those messages out really quickly, and it makes people feel that you're in control, because you are, and you're starting to get ahead. The log helped with that because everything's consistent, everything was the same, the messages were the same, they look the same, they sound the same, it looks like you're in control. And I've mentioned there already about people being on furlough and the mental health impact on them. That's where you can't leave people just sort of drifting, because to be off for that period of time is bad. It's bad for people. I was off when I was injured for almost 2 years, and in that time I know I was retired, but I came to feel very disconnected very quickly from the police and from the organisation, and it's not good for you. Which is why we were lucky that we had IIRSM. If we hadn't have had IIRSM, I don't know, we would have found some other way of communicating with people. But that's really important. Get your comms concise, get them consistent, and just get them out all the time and record what it is you've sent out and what comes back. Change management is about how you're managing the change that's now come on you. So COVID's a change, and you've got to have a structured approach to it. And crisis management is a structure, but within your structure, you've got to have flex, and you've got to be able to accept that change is inevitable and mistakes are inevitable. And it was often the case that what I would advise on a Tuesday, by Tuesday afternoon, off sometimes was wrong, because information had changed, or an idea that we'd had, for example, before the first lockdown, we were thinking about ways of sort of supporting people who had young children when the schools first locked down, and we thought about, is it a good idea to make one of the offices almost like a creche for people to bring their kids in? And very quickly that became, no, that is a really bad idea, because people shouldn't mix. But we had a risk assessment drafted up for it. That was a mistake. That didn't go ahead. But they're the sort of things where it's an idea and people are having ideas, and at the time it sounded like a tangible, decent welfare idea. But very quickly that idea became, that's actually wrong, because we're all going to be socially distanced and all that kind of stuff. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. What you've got to do when you make one is make another decision really quickly and keep going forwards. And you've got to remember that with crisis management and change management, it's not a straight line from A to B. You're never going to get there in a straight line. To get from A to B in a crisis, you need to zigzag. You might need to go back on yourself. You might hit a dead end. You might hit a fork in the road. It's never a straight line. Don't think it's going to be straightforward, because it isn't. Accept that, and accept moving on. Use your log, record your decisions, because if you're ever asked later on, as we were often with certain operations, why was that decision made, that's why you record everything, because these were the circumstances at the time. This was the decision I made at the time, based on the information that I had at the time. Hindsight's brilliant. In a crisis, it's useless to you. You're making decisions there and then. You can call it dynamic risk assessment if you want, but that's what you're doing. So your key decision makers, increase the frequency that you meet with people, we moved from a monthly get together where we would get together as a senior team and each department discuss their issues, to a daily meeting every single day, and we kept that up for months and months and months every day, and it maintains focus for people, and it's very easy to log your actions. They all go on your log, and people have actions every single day to go away and do stuff with, and you've got that focus all the time, and it keeps everybody focused on what you're doing. Again, that's flexible, so as you sort of start to move through your crisis, we felt more comfortable to move that daily meeting to a like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I think then it went to a Monday and a Friday, and then it went to a Monday, and eventually we had a sort of a closing down day, if you like, where we closed the log, and it's now just a watching brief over it, because who knows what's going to happen this winter. Some of this might have to come back again. It's flexible, but there's a structure there of how we operate in a COVID environment. So an example then of what we did in some change management was we had created a critical contractor process. So we were out and about on the roads, pretty quick, and was on there. There was the contact on there to contact me if anyone wanted to, and we use those. It's little things that become, these are issues that you don't think of. Even checking into a hotel at one stage last year during the first lockdown was really hard, because you had to prove why you were there. So these letters really helped us, and we shared them with clients, and they wrote back to us, and there was a bit of a two-way communication going on there, where they'd identify us, we'd already identified ourselves. So that really worked, and we threw that out to all of our supply chain then as well, and to then become for us almost like an approved critical contractor, not just a subcontractor, an approved critical contractor. We wanted to see what their measures were for COVID, and we had RAMs for what their COVID measures were and how they were going to adapt on our sites, and what measures they would take to adopt this. It was all around that critical contractor process. So that was one of the ways we changed how we word, and it worked for us. So that's change management. Have a structure, be flexible, accept change, accept you're going to get things wrong, learn from it, but keep making the decisions and make them often, and keep people focused on what you're doing, because complacency kicks in really quickly, because you become humans adapt to their situation quicker than you think, and they do, and it can become complacency can creep in, and that's not good when you're in a crisis. You've got to keep people sharp, on the point, focused on what you're doing all the time. So they're my tips for that. Decision making is really important, because if you don't make decisions in a crisis, you are finished. Don't be afraid of making them. Make them, and I've said there, you take an informed gamble, and don't think it's anything other than that sometimes, because it is an informed gamble. It's an informed risk, because you're not dealing with a crisis. Is like a puzzle, and some of the pieces of the puzzle are missing, and you're never going to see them. So you do the best you can with what you've got, but you've got to take those informed decisions. You've got to take those. Some of them it is a gamble. Be prepared for it. Document why you've done it. Run it through in your mind, and if that's the best decision that you can be made at that time, that's what you're going to do. If that turns out to be wrong later, then that's fine. Make some changes and keep moving forward. What you can't do is let the crisis happen to you. COVID-19 we couldn't just sit back. And this is one of the key takeaways. I said to the senior team very early on that we can't let this happen to us. We've got to get in front. So there was a sort of reluctancy at first to make some decisions, but very quickly, when people start to feel okay, I can understand there's a structure and people feel a little bit more at ease with the way that we're operating, you can start to make decisions. And because indecision is a killer, it is a killer. You cannot stand still or sit still and wait for things to happen to you, because they will, and you won't be in control of the outcome. You have to get control of the outcome. I said it before, I'll say it again, you've got to accept mistakes. If you don't want to have mistakes, or you don't think that mistakes aren't going to happen in this kind of environment or scenario, it's just not true, because they will. Accept it, move on from it, and keep moving forward. There's a bit of a phrase where people say it's about making mistakes, make little ones, make them often, just don't make them in the end. That's very true. You know, make your mistakes early, make some of the decisions, make them early. If they're wrong, no problem, make another one and keep moving forward. At the end, you shouldn't be making those mistakes. You should feel in control. You should feel in control, and you'll be in control if you start to adopt some of these tactics. It's the way to do it. But do not be afraid of making decisions, and do not be afraid of making mistakes. It is going to happen. Resilience, then, you need loads of it. An organisation needs loads of it. You've got to have it. There's no way around it, because whatever plan you come up with, no plan survives first contact. So you can have the best plan in the world. I've had, you know, operations that have been planned to the finest detail, and literally the minute, you know, the op goes live, plan goes out the window because something's changed, something's not been accounted for. No plan ever really survives. It's, you know, what it looks like on paper is in reality very different. And some of our plans, like I've said there, some of the things that we thought were good ideas just weren't. Don't be worried. This is normal. Keep focused, keep people on point, and keep making the decisions. As it goes on, take some time out from it as well, though. So this was intense. This was really, really intense, and dealing with something like this is hard work. So as quickly as I could, I looked to get one of my team back from furlough to support with some of this, because it really is hard work. And for people who've been through it on the call, they will know it is hard. It's very, very hard, because there was nothing to compare it to. There was nothing you could sort of draw upon. You know, at first there wasn't even any sort of guidance, something like for us in construction from the Construction Leadership Council. There was nothing. Like, we were literally, I was making it up on the fly, basically thinking about, well, what really is COVID? Is it you know, is it a pathogen, or is it like a sort of is it like a dust, or, you know, how would you sort of respond to it? It's hard work, and the weight of 170 people's jobs are on your shoulders. I never thought I'd see, you know, the owners of the business in tears. That's not easy to see, through just the weight of it, and it's hard. So you've got to take some time out. And after the first site was opened and we started to open all the other sites, I just took a couple of days, not just on the weekend because it was intense, just a couple of days to even think about something else, because that's really important. That's a bit of sort of self-preservation for yourself. Take some time out for yourself, and then you can go back to it and keep going, but keep watch that, because no one can just take it forever. No one can. No one's that resilient. Just keep going with it, but take some time out. A couple of examples then of how we approached issues like people, like positive cases in the early stages, and what we were going to adopt. So in sort of counter-terror work, if you're going to an incident They have a principle called the 1, 2, 3 principle, and that's if there's one casualty who perhaps is showing some sort of symptoms, and this was sort of introduced when the threat of sort of domestic terror in the UK was quite high. We were sort of trained in this kind of stuff. If there's one person who's got sort of symptoms, you would respond to it as you would do normally. So we introduced this sort of idea. If we had somebody, because our main thing was keeping the central office going as long as we could and keeping it open, and we didn't want multiple COVID issues from one location, because that really is an issue for you, and we completely avoided that. We had literally sporadic out people, one person, you know, in one area, one person miles away in another. We had that kind of thing happening to us. So if we had one person, let's take the office. So the office has got 50 people in it. So if there's one person goes down with COVID, we would do the deep clean in that area, but we would keep going, that kind of stuff. 2 people at the same time, again, this is like your sort of red, amber, green, if you like. Again, cautious, but keep going. 3 or more for us was we've got an outbreak. So if we ever had, and we didn't, 3 or more people, let's say on a site or in an office at the same time who went down with COVID, you've got an outbreak. And they brought this in, if you followed all the guidance, it was a very similar thing that they brought in, because this is pretty standard, this, and it's sort of crisis management and emergency services sort of training. If you have 3 or more people, it's an outbreak, you'd have to shut the site. And so we had that in our minds all the time. That was going to be our approach. So you're ahead already about thinking about, because people were asking, well, what are we going to do if, you know, we get 3 people who've got COVID? Well, that's yeah, the last chance to leave. You've got the office shut, the site shut. That's what we do. And the other thing to think about is this thing called the 5 C's, and this is really important, of a way of being able to make a decision and make an informed decision on something that's happening. And the 5C approach is, first you've got to confirm what it is you're dealing with. So I'm going to go through it. So it's confirm, clear, cordon, control, and check. Confirm, clear, cordon, control, and check. And that is an emergency services idea. But the most important thing and the most translatable thing for the private sector or for non sort of service people is confirmation. So you've got to understand first what it is you're dealing with. And if you don't understand, or you didn't understand with COVID, let's say what the rules around isolation were, or if you didn't understand whether you were a key worker or not, or you didn't understand what you'd have to do if you had an outbreak, if you couldn't confirm it first, your decision making is going to be off. So really understand your confirmation bit, and if you understand that, your decisions will flow, because you've got to confirm what it is you're dealing with, and then your other decisions will come from that. If you haven't confirmed it, if you're guessing about what to do in a crisis, if you're guessing whether what should we do if there's a positive, then your decision making is going to be off. You haven't got control. So confirm what it is you're dealing with first. Start to understand what you're dealing with, and that's where you're going to be busy. You're going to be busy researching what to do. I was reading all sorts of guidance, and when it all sort of came out, I used my team to help with that. You know, cross-reference material, use people to understand it, but get confirmation of what it is you're dealing with, and that's resilience. Don't worry about making mistakes again. It's a bit of a key theme. That's what it is. I'm nearly finished. Concluding remarks then. Crisis management and how to deal with it is all about keeping things simple, keeping things sensible, keeping things proportionate, and they are key things, not just for crisis management for me, but for what my approach to safety is, and what my approach to sort of people management in general is is those things. Keep it simple, keep it sensible, keep it proportionate. You know, we're talking about a risk-based approach here if you want, but that's what to do, certainly in a crisis. And record your decisions. I got told once that, and it was like a courtroom skills exercise, if it isn't written down, it never happened. It is very hard to justify why you've made the decision, especially when there's limited information, and it's, you know, it's one of those informed gambles that we've talked about. Why you've made a decision, it is much easier when you've got it written down, especially if time's passed, because memory fades, that you can refer to a document and say, well, this is why I made that decision. It was based upon these factors, and that's what I did. Again, we talked about it before. If it proves out to be wrong, no problem, but that's why I decided to do that then. You know, we were putting people out in stores and off to work, and I would never put anyone anywhere that I wouldn't go, and that was important. That I would go out and I would be visible. I would go and do it myself, you know, and knowing that what I was doing was safe, because that's important. Because I've got a family, I've got kids as well. I'm not going to put myself anywhere that anyone else isn't going to go. But it's important to those decisions that were made. That's why we made them. So if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. Remember that. I've got a whole other presentation on sort of that kind of stuff for investigations and why that's important. But that's for another day. And that is that. Question time.
Thank you, Simon. And that's great. Thank you so much. Has anybody got any questions? If they have, can they just drop them into the question section, and I can pass them on to Simon to answer. Lee, just while we're waiting for those questions to come through, Lee, do you have any comments or questions for Simon yourself?
Yeah, so you know, thank you very much, Simon. So really good, you know, kind of stuff. Took me back to my days in the emergency service and the Home Office College at Easingwold and stuff like that. So and for me, one of the great things that, you know, came across for me personally is this kind of high level decision making within crisis plans. And it's one of the things that when I come to help companies with things like business continuity, you know, management, business continuity plans, is actually helping them understand that actually the crisis plan, the actual BCP kind of elements in the crisis plan needs to be at that level rather than full of lots and lots of details. And for me, you know, did you find that really helped in your business, having that nice kind of, you know, that dynamic high level decision making rather than lots of detail in a plan?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you're taking broad strokes, aren't you, at that stage? And like I said at the start, it's almost the opposite of what people learn about being transformational, having lots of people involved in decision making. That's usually a good thing, and it is a good thing, and I'm, you know, a big advocate of it. But when you're really in the thick of it, it is that you've got to have an overview, very quick. The detail, you know, it's for another time. That's the approach. Absolutely, that's the idea.
But I almost anticipated you saying, you know, so basically there was a gold command and a silver command and a bronze command, you know, so
there you go. That is exactly the approach. I didn't put it in because, you know, I don't want to use too much jargon, but yeah, it's gold command, isn't it? It's gold, silver, bronze. There you go.
Absolutely. And just one more question from my, you know, from my perspective, I think it might help other people as well. Is, did your broad stroke kind of stuff, that kind of, you know, having a you know, a top level decision making process, how did that integrate when you were dealing with your clients who perhaps had their own, you know, BCP kind of things being activated or crisis plans being activated, but were full of lots of detail and lots of, you know, checklists and various things? Did that how did that work for you, and how did you overcome some of those things?
At first, certain clients hated it because they just weren't used to it. You could sort of, after a while, you could tell some people who'd done a bit of this sort of, right, I can see what they're doing. We had a bit of it. The first 48 hours, people, you know, I won't name any names, any clients, but a major client in the food retail industry wasn't sort of happy, wanted a lot of detail. You know, early on, there was sort of almost checklists and what's your approach to this going to be, and that going to be, and we're not going there yet. And yeah, that we definitely came up against it there. This is where you've got to be resilient. You've got to understand, you know, why we're doing it. We're buying thinking time, and the two owners were really good, and they just let me run with it, if I'm honest, which was really good, and I won't ever forget that. I did go home the first night thinking, I hope I'm right. I've just wiped £9 million off the company overnight. But you know, it's the way to do it. That they were really good. I got good support from them. But no, you're right. You could tell some of the organisations who tested their business continuity plans perhaps properly, had a bit of crisis management training themselves. You could see a bit of what was going on, and after a while, it just became the norm, and you sort of you adapt to, well, this is our approach, you know.
Yeah, so absolutely. Well, once again, thank you very much, Simon, for sharing, you know, that particular journey. I think, you know, for some people it might be very reaffirming, but others, you know, it might actually be a tool to put in the box, you know, especially some of those particular approaches, you know, when we think about, you know, kind of, you know, the future of, you know, kind of risk management in a nutshell. But yeah, thank you very, very much. Donna, any questions coming through from any of our attendees?
So we've got more of a comment really from Stephen McDonald. Thank you, Stephen. So Stephen would like to say thank you for a really informative presentation and for a subject matter that's very relatable.
Okay.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Okay,
Brilliant.
super. Well, just to kind of then finish off with from our own perspective, so again, obviously a big thank you to Simon. I'll just kind of move myself slightly out of the way because I think I can see people on the full screen now. I've readjusted my my settings. Just to let you know, October is going to be around kind of drugs, alcohol in the workplace, and the influences of festivities like the run up to, you know, kind of Christmas and New Year. So we'll be looking at some drugs and alcohol stuff on that webinar in October. The date is yet to be confirmed, so do please keep a lookout for that and book on. And then in November, we have assessing and improving competency, which is one of the things that I've been doing all day today. So competency management frameworks and various other things. So we'll look at different approaches and what different companies are applying, what the enforcing authorities and you know, what the courts sometimes apply when health and safety cases come before them. So that's what we've got in that program. So you know, thank you for attending this evening. I'm really pleased that people have found it really useful. And once again, big thank you to you, Simon, for presenting information to us and exceptionally useful information as well. So thank you very much for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Lee. And hopefully everyone that attended, we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Super. Thank you very much.
Bye.